The frozen wind swept across the fjord, carrying with them the scent of salt and the promise of spring. Valka Haraldsdottir stood at the bow of her father's longship, her auburn hair whipping around her face as she gazed at the settlement of Ravholm coming into view. 5 winters had passed since she had last seen these shores, 5 winters spent raiding, trading, and learning the ways of leadership from her father, Jarl Harald the Wise. But Harald was not returning to his people. 3 nights ago, as they sailed through a storm that seemed birthed from Njord's fury itself, an errant spar had broken loose, striking the old Jarl and sending him to the halls of his ancestors. Now Valka brought her father home for his final journey, a burning ship that would carry him to Valhalla. The people of Ravholm gathered on the shore as the fleet of 5 longships approached. Their faces were somber, their eyes searching for their leader. When they saw only Valka standing at the helm of the lead ship, whispers spread through the crowd like wildfire. "Ravholm!" Valka called as she stepped onto the shore, her voice strong despite the grief that threatened to choke her. "My father, Jarl Harald, has fallen. He feasts now in Odin's hall." A murmur rose from the gathered people, a mixture of grief and uncertainty. Valka had grown up among them, had learned to wield axe and sword alongside the boys, had sailed on her first raid at 14. But never in the history of their people had a woman led as Jarl. Thorsten the elder, his beard white as the winter snow, stepped forward. "Who leads us now, daughter of Harald?" Valka lifted her chin, her green eyes flashing with determination. "I am my father's only child. He named me his heir with his dying breath. I will lead Ravholm." The silence that followed was deafening. Then Gunnar Ironhand, the settlement's most respected warrior, stepped forward, his scarred face twisted in a scowl. "No woman can be Jarl," he declared. "It is not our way." "The old ways change or die," Valka replied evenly. "My father believed this. It is why he taught me to lead, to fight, to sail. It is why he named me heir." "The thing must decide," Thorsten said, referring to the assembly that governed their people's matters. "We will gather tonight after Harald is sent to Valhalla." Valka nodded, knowing she had no choice. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, she oversaw the preparation of her father's ship. His body was laid upon it, surrounded by his weapons, treasures, and even his favorite hound that had been slain to accompany him. When darkness fell, she took a torch from Thorsten and set the ship ablaze, watching as the flames leapt toward the star-strewn sky. "Guide him well, All-Father," she whispered, feeling the tears she had held back finally slide down her cheeks. "Until I join him in your hall." The thing gathered in the great hall afterward, the air thick with tension. Valka stood before them, dressed in the fine blue wool dress she had donned for her father's funeral, with her sword still belted at her waist, a warrior even in mourning. Gunnar Ironhand spoke first. "A woman cannot lead raids. A woman cannot stand shield to shield in battle. A woman cannot command the respect of warriors." "I have done all these things," Valka countered. "I have sailed with my father for 5 winters. I have led men in battle. I have brought back wealth to Ravholm." "It is not our way," Gunnar insisted. "Then perhaps our ways must change," said a quiet voice from the back of the hall. All heads turned to see Petra the Wise, the settlement's elderly seeress. She walked slowly to the center of the gathering, leaning on her staff. "The ravens of Odin have spoken to me," she said, her milky eyes seeming to look beyond the physical world. "They show me Ravholm prospering under a shield maiden's rule. They show me new alliances, new strength." Murmurs filled the hall. Few would dare challenge Petra's visions. "Let her prove herself," suggested Thorsten. "If the gods favor her, let them show us a sign." "A contest, then," said Gunnar, a cunning smile spreading across his face. 3 challenges, one of strength, one of wisdom, one of leadership. If she prevails, she will be Jarl. If she fails, she will accept her place as a woman and marry whichever man claims the jarldom. Valka met his gaze without flinching. "I accept your challenge, Gunnar Ironhand. And when I win, you will be the first to swear fealty to me." The challenges were set for the following day. As dawn broke, the entire settlement gathered to witness them. The first was a test of strength, a wrestling match against Gunnar's son, Eric, a hulking young warrior with arms like tree trunks. Valka had no illusions about overpowering him. Instead, she used her speed and agility, ducking under his grappling attempts and using his own momentum against him. 3 times she managed to trip him to the ground, winning the match to the astonishment of many. The second challenge was one of wisdom, riddles posed by the elders. Valka had spent long winter nights listening to her father's counsel and the stories of the Skalds. She answered each question thoughtfully, demonstrating a depth of knowledge that impressed even her detractors. The final challenge was leadership, to present a plan for Ravholm's future that would convince the Thing of her vision. Valka spoke of expanded trade routes, of alliances with neighboring settlements, of better defenses against the increasing threats from the east. "And what of raids?" Gunnar demanded. "Will you lead our warriors to glory and plunder as a Jarl must?" "I will," Valka answered, "but I will choose our targets wisely. The Christian kingdoms to the south grow stronger. They learn our ways and prepare for our coming. We must adapt or perish." As the Thing deliberated, Valka stood proudly, refusing to show any doubt. Finally, Torsten stepped forward. "The Thing has decided," he announced. "Valka Haraldsdottir has proven her worth in all challenges. By the will of the gods and the voice of the people, she is now Jarl of Ravholm." Cheers and shouts mixed with grumbles of dissent, but none could dispute the decision. Gunnar approached her, his face a mask of controlled fury. "I will honor the Thing's decision," he said stiffly, dropping to one knee before her. "But know this, I will be watching for any sign of weakness. At the first falter, I will challenge you again." "I expect nothing less," Valka replied. "Your strength and counsel will be valuable to Ravholm, Gunnar Ironhand, if you can see past your pride to offer them." The first months of Valka's rule were fraught with challenges. Some warriors refused to follow a woman, departing to join other settlements. Others tested her authority at every turn. But slowly, she began to win respect through her fair judgments, strategic mind, and willingness to listen to the counsel of experienced warriors and elders. When spring came in full force, she announced her first raid as Jarl. They would sail to the eastern shores of Angleland, to a monastery that was said to hold great riches yet was lightly defended. Some scoffed at the modest target, but Valka was determined that her first raid would be a success, not a bloody defeat. The raid went exactly as planned. They struck at dawn, overwhelming the few guards without losing a single warrior. The monks offered no resistance, and the haul of silver, gold, and precious manuscripts was substantial. But as they were loading the plunder onto their ships, a contingent of Saxon warriors appeared, clearly summoned by someone who had escaped the initial attack. "Form shield wall," Valka commanded, drawing her sword. Her warriors responded instantly, forming the defensive formation that had made Norse raiders so formidable. The battle was brief but fierce. The Saxons, though numerous, were not expecting the disciplined resistance they met. Valka fought in the center of the line, her shield taking blow after blow, her sword finding gaps in the enemy's armor. When it was over, 5 of her warriors lay dead or wounded, but the Saxons had been driven off, leaving twice as many of their own on the blooded sand. It was as they were tending to their wounded that Valka noticed him, a young man with dark hair and strange clothing, too finely dressed to be a common monk but not garbed as a warrior either. He was attempting to drag one of the wounded Saxons away from the battle site. "You," she called in the Saxon tongue, which she had learned from a thrall in her father's household. "Stop there." The man froze, then slowly turned to face her, his chin raised in defiance. "I will not leave him to die," he said in accented Norse, surprising her. "You speak our tongue." Valka approached cautiously, her sword still drawn. "I am Percival Inglet," he replied. "I have studied your people, your language. I am a scholar, not a warrior." Valka assessed him quickly, tall, with intelligent blue eyes and a face that would be considered handsome by any standard. But it was the lack of fear in his gaze that intrigued her most. "A Saxon scholar who speaks Norse," she mused. "You would fetch a good price as a thrall." "I would make a poor slave," he replied with unexpected humor. "I am clumsy with physical tasks and too stubborn for my own good." Despite the gravity of the situation, Valka found herself smiling. What brings a scholar to a monastery under Viking attack? I came to study the manuscripts here, he said, gesturing to the burning building behind them. Many of which your men are now using to kindle fires. Valka glanced over and saw that he was right. Several of her warriors were indeed using parchment to help start fires for heating water for the wounded. Those have value, she asked. Beyond measure, to those who can read them. An idea formed in Valka's mind. Can you read all languages? Many, he admitted. Latin, Greek, Norse runes, Saxon script, Frankish. Gunnar. Valka called to her second-in-command. Have the men stop burning the manuscripts. Gather them instead. She turned back to Percival. You have a choice, Saxon. Come with us as a thrall and help us determine which of these writings have value for trade, or die here with your wounded friend. Percival looked at the injured Saxon, who had lost consciousness. He is not my friend, merely a man in need. And he will die whether I stay or go. His eyes met hers directly. I will come with you, if you promise that I will not be mistreated and may eventually earn my freedom. You are in no position to negotiate, Valka pointed out. Yet here we are, negotiating, he countered. This time, Valka laughed outright. Very well, scholar. You will not be mistreated as long as you prove useful. As for freedom, that will depend on many factors. And so Percival Inglet joined the raiders of Ravholm on their return journey, the first of many changes that would come under Valka's rule. The return to Ravholm was triumphant. Despite the loss of 5 warriors, the raid had been highly successful, bringing wealth to the settlement and proving Valka's leadership. The captured manuscripts, which Percival identified as valuable for trade with other monasteries or noble courts, were an unexpected bonus. Valka assigned Percival to work with Leif the Learned, one of the few men in Ravholm who could read runes and had an interest in knowledge beyond their shores. The Saxon scholar was given quarters in Leif's home and treated as a valued thrall rather than a common slave. Over the following weeks, Valka found herself increasingly drawn to conversations with the unusual captive. His knowledge of the wider world, of the political shifts in the Saxon kingdoms and the Frankish Empire, proved valuable for planning future raids and trade expeditions. The Saxon kingdoms are becoming more united under King Egbert, Percival told her one evening as they sat in the Great Hall, studying a crude map he had drawn. They learn from each raid, strengthen their defenses. Then we must raid where they do not expect, Valka replied, or find other ways to prosper. Trade. Percival suggested. Your people are masterful shipbuilders, unparalleled navigators. These skills could bring wealth without bloodshed. Some would say that is not our way, Valka said, thinking of Gunnar and his followers. Yet you became Jarl by challenging your way, Percival pointed out. Perhaps your people can embrace more changes. Their conversations often continued late into the night, moving from practical matters to philosophy, beliefs, and the differences between their cultures. Valka found his mind as sharp as any warrior's blade, his perspective refreshing after a lifetime surrounded by those who rarely questioned their traditions. For his part, Percival was fascinated by this fierce woman leader. He had come to the northern lands to study the Norse people, their language and customs, driven by a scholar's curiosity rather than the fear and hatred most of his countrymen harbored. In Valka, he saw something unexpected, a visionary leader who could bridge the old ways and the new. As summer waned, Valka organized a grand feast to distribute the wealth from their raid and to announce her plans for the coming season. She had decided there would be one more raid before winter, this time targeting a trading settlement rather than a religious site. After that, they would focus on strengthening their own defenses and establishing new trade connections to the east. During the feast, as the mead flowed freely and the skald sang of ancient heroes, Gunnar Ironhand approached Valka's high seat, his expression grim. The men talk, he said without preamble. They say you spend too much time with the Saxon thrall, that you value his counsel over that of your own warriors. I value all counsel that has merit, Valka replied evenly. Percival understands our enemies in ways we do not. He is filling your head with UN Norse ideas, Gunnar growled. Trade instead of raid, talk instead of action. And some say more than talk passes between you. Valka's hand moved to her sword hilt. Choose your next words with care, Iron Hand. I speak only of concerns voiced by others, Gunnar said, lifting his hands in a placating gesture. But consider how it appears, a woman Jarl, unprecedented already, now seemingly enthralled by a foreign captive. It undermines your authority. Valka knew there was truth in his words, much as she loathed to admit it. Her position was still precarious, she could not afford to give her detractors any ammunition against her. Your concern is noted, she said coolly. Now rejoin the feast and put these rumors to rest. But that night, as she lay awake in her bed, Valka confronted the uncomfortable truth that Gunnar had forced her to face. Her interest in Percival had grown beyond his value as a source of knowledge. She found herself watching him when he wasn't looking, enjoying the sound of his voice, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. These were dangerous feelings for a Jarl who needed the respect of her warriors. The following morning, she summoned Percival to the shore, away from prying ears. You will not join our councils for a time, she told him without preamble. Continue your work with Leif, but we will not meet privately again. Percival studied her face, his expression unreadable. May I ask what has changed? Nothing has changed, Valka said sharply. I am simply clarifying your position here. I see. His voice was quiet. And if I were to say that much has changed for me since I came to Ravholm? That I have come to admire its Jarl beyond what is wise for a captive to feel for his captor. Valka's heart hammered in her chest, but she kept her face impassive. Then I would say you should guard such thoughts carefully, Saxon. They can lead only to difficulty for us both. She turned to leave, but Percival caught her arm, a liberty no thrall should take with the Jarl. Yet she did not pull away. I have watched you lead, he said softly. I have seen how you balance strength with wisdom, how you fight not just for glory but for the future of your people. In my land, such leadership is rare, even among men. Percival, let me finish. I understand the precariousness of your position. I will keep my distance as you command. But know this, what I feel is not the passing fancy of a captive seeking better treatment. It is the respect and admiration of a man who has glimpsed greatness. He released her arm and stepped back, bowing slightly. Jarl Valka. As he walked away, Valka remained rooted to the spot, torn between the demands of her position and the undeniable pull she felt toward the Saxon scholar. The second raid of the season set sail 2 weeks later. Valka led 3 ships toward a trading post on the eastern coast of Angleland, a place where merchants gathered to exchange goods from across the Saxon kingdoms. Percival had provided valuable information about its defenses and the best time to strike, when most of the wealthy merchants would be present but the guard would be changed. The raid was swift and successful, with minimal bloodshed. They captured rich stores of amber, silver, furs, and finished goods that would see Ravholm prosper through the winter. But as they were preparing to depart, disaster struck. A contingent of Saxon Thegns arrived unexpectedly, leading a force 3 times the size of Valka's raiding party. The Vikings formed a shield wall on the beach, but they were quickly flanked by mounted warriors. Valka fought fiercely, dropping 2 Saxons with well-placed strikes, but a third drove his spear into her side between the plates of her armor. She fell to one knee, blood soaking her tunic. Gunnar fought his way to her side, standing over her as she struggled to rise. We must retreat to the ships, he shouted above the din of battle. Help me up, Valka gasped, gripping her sword tightly despite the pain. Gunnar hauled her to her feet, and together they began fighting their way back to the shoreline where their longships waited. Warriors fell around them, Saxon and Norse alike, but the tide of battle had clearly turned against the raiders. They had almost reached the ships when another wave of Saxons cut them off. Valka, weakening from blood loss, knew they would not break through. Go, she ordered Gunnar. Get as many as you can to the ships. Tell Torsten, tell him to prepare Ravholm for what's coming. I will not leave you, Gunnar protested, surprising her with his loyalty. You must, Valka insisted. Ravholm needs its warriors. I will hold them as long as I can. Gunnar hesitated, then clasped her arm in a warrior's grip. You have been a true Jarl, Valka Haraldsdottir. The Skalds will sing of your courage. As Gunnar led a desperate charge toward the ships, Valka turned to face the approaching Saxons. She would die as her father had lived, with honor, with courage, ensuring her people could escape. She raised her shield and sword, prepared to meet as many of them as she could take to Valhalla with her. But before the Saxons reached her, arrows rained down from the tree line, dropping the frontmost warriors. A group of fighters emerged from the forest, led by a familiar figure wielding a Saxon sword with surprising skill, Percival. He had followed them, it seemed, perhaps guessing that the information he had provided might be flawed or outdated. Now he fought alongside a group of what appeared to be local rebels or outcasts, creating enough chaos and confusion to allow the remaining Vikings to reach their ships. Percival fought his way to Valka's side, his face grim with determination. "Can you walk?" he shouted over the clash of steel. "Barely," she admitted, swaying on her feet. Without hesitation, he slung her arm over his shoulder and began half-carrying her toward the ships, his companions providing covering fire with their bows. "Why?" Valka gasped as they stumbled across the sand. Questions later, Percival replied tersely. "Living first." They reached the last longship just as it was pushing away from shore. Hands reached down to pull Valka aboard, but she clung to Percival. "Him too," she commanded weakly. "And any of his men who can make it." 3 of Percival's companions managed to wade out and climb aboard before the pursuing Saxons made further rescue impossible. The ship's oars bit into the water, carrying them swiftly away from the shoreline as arrows splashed harmlessly in their wake. Valka collapsed on the deck, her vision darkening. The last thing she saw before consciousness left her was Percival's concerned face hovering above hers, his lips moving in what might have been a prayer. She awoke 3 days later in her own bed in Ravholm, her side throbbing with pain but cleanly bandaged. Petra the Wise sat beside her, grinding herbs in a small bowl. "Welcome back to the living, Jarl," the old woman said without looking up. "You gave us quite a fright." "My warriors?" Valka asked, her throat dry and raspy. 12 dead, 8 wounded, yourself included, Petra replied. "Better than it might have been, thanks to the Saxon and his friends." "Percival," Valka murmured. "Where is he?" A small smile played at the corners of Petra's weathered lips. "Defending you, as it happens. There's quite the argument occurring in the Great Hall. Some call for his execution, claiming he led you into a trap. Others point out that he saved you and many warriors at risk to himself." Valka struggled to sit up, ignoring the sharp pain in her side. "Help me dress. I need to go to the hall." "You need rest," Petra countered, placing a restraining hand on Valka's shoulder. "I need to prevent my people from killing the man who saved my life," Valka insisted. "Now help me, or I'll go as I am." Grudgingly, Petra helped Valka into a simple dress and supported her as they made their slow way to the Great Hall. Inside, voices were raised in heated debate. Gunnar stood on one side, gesturing angrily, while Percival faced him calmly from the other, flanked by Leif the Learned and Thorsten the Elder. "The timing was too convenient," Gunnar was saying. "How did the Saxon Thegns know to be there if not warned by him?" "I gave you the information I had," Percival replied steadily. "If it was wrong, the fault is mine, but not from treachery. Information grows stale. Patterns change." "Then why follow us?" demanded Eric, Gunnar's son. "Why bring your own fighting men?" "Because I feared exactly what happened," Percival answered. "I heard rumors in the settlement that the local lord had increased patrols. I tried to warn Leif, but by then you had already sailed." "Convenient excuses," Gunnar spat. "Enough." Valka's voice cut through the argument despite its weakness. All heads turned to see her standing in the doorway, pale but upright. "The Jarl lives," someone shouted, and cheers erupted from many throats. Valka walked slowly into the hall, grateful for Petra's supporting arm but careful to appear as strong as possible under the circumstances. "I have heard enough to understand the situation," she said, her voice gaining strength with each word. Percival Inglet risked his life to save mine and those of many warriors. Whatever his reasons for following us, his actions on the battlefield speak for themselves. But, Jarl, Gunnar protested, the ambush was likely the result of our own success, Valka interrupted. We have raided the same coastline twice in one season. The Saxons are not fools, they learn and adapt, just as we do. She turned to face Percival directly. You were under no obligation to return, having gone beyond our settlement's bounds. You could have sought your freedom. Instead, you came to our aid. Percival met her gaze steadily. I could not do otherwise. Something in his voice, in the intensity of his gaze, sent warmth spreading through Valka despite her weakness. She turned back to address the hall. The Saxon and his companions who fought alongside him have earned their freedom and a place among us, if they wish it. This is my judgment as Jarl. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, some approving, others uncertain. Gunnar's face was thunderous, but he did not openly challenge her decision. Now, Valka continued, I must rest and heal. Torsten and Gunnar will oversee the settlement's affairs until I am well enough to resume my duties. As she turned to leave, she caught Percival's eye once more. The gratitude and something deeper in his expression told her that their conversation was far from over. The weeks of recovery that followed gave Valka ample time to reflect on the changes in Ravholm since she had become Jarl. Despite the losses from the last raid, the settlement was prospering. The wealth they had brought back would see them through the winter comfortably, and the defensive improvements she had ordered were nearly complete. More significantly, the mood of the people had shifted. Those who had initially opposed her leadership had mostly come to accept it, especially after she had proven herself in battle and survived a wound that would have killed many warriors. Even Gunnar had grudgingly acknowledged her strength, though he remained wary of her growing reliance on foreign counsel. Percival and his 3 companions had integrated into the community with surprising ease. One, a skilled bowyer, had quickly found a place making the superior longbows his people were known for. Another was a talented smith who introduced new techniques for working iron. The third was a healer whose knowledge of herbs complemented Petra's skills. Percival himself had become something of an unofficial diplomat, helping Valka establish communication with neighboring Saxon settlements for potential trade rather than raid. His knowledge of languages and customs proved invaluable, and his willingness to embrace Norse ways while maintaining his own identity earned him respect from many who had initially distrusted him. As the first snows of winter began to fall, Valka was finally well enough to resume all her duties as Jarl. She called for a feast to celebrate the settlement's survival and success, and to honor those who had fallen in the season's raids. During the feast, as the mead flowed freely and the great hall echoed with laughter and song, Percival approached her high seat. He no longer wore the simple clothes of a thrall but was dressed in the Norse style, though without the ostentatious displays of wealth that some warriors favored. May I join you, Jarl? He asked formally. Valka gestured to the empty seat beside her. You may. He sat, his movements betraying a slight discomfort with being in such a prominent position. Your people seem happy tonight. They are well-fed, warm, and safe, Valka replied. In winter, that is enough for happiness. And their Jarl? Is she happy? Valka turned to study his face in the firelight. She is content with what has been accomplished. But not happy, Percival noted perceptively. Valka sighed. Happiness is a luxury for those who do not bear responsibility for others' lives. I disagree, Percival said softly. Responsibility need not preclude joy. The greatest leaders I have studied found strength in their connections to others, not isolation from them. Are you suggesting I am isolated, Percival Inglet? Valka asked, arching an eyebrow. I am suggesting that you need not be, he replied. Not anymore. Their eyes met, and the unspoken tension that had simmered between them since his rescue of her flared to life. Valka was acutely aware of the eyes of her people upon them, of the whispers that would surely follow. Walk with me, she said abruptly, rising from her seat. The hall grows too warm. They slipped outside into the crisp winter night. Stars glittered overhead like scattered gems on a jewelless cloth, and their breath clouded in the cold air. They walked in silence to the edge of the settlement, where a cliff overlooked the frozen fjord. "You risked much to save me," Valka said at last. "As did you, ordering your men to take me and my companions aboard when every moment meant more lives at risk," Percival countered. "Why did you really follow us that day?" Valka asked, turning to face him. "The truth, Percival." He met her gaze unflinchingly. "Because I could not bear the thought of harm coming to you. Because in the short time I have known you, Valka Haraldsdottir, you have come to mean more to me than wisdom dictates is wise." "Unwise indeed," Valka murmured, though she made no move to increase the distance between them. "I am Jarl. You are a foreigner, barely accepted among my people." "Yet here we are," Percival said, echoing the words he had spoken on the day of his capture. "Here we are," Valka agreed softly. Then, making a decision that felt both reckless and inevitable, she closed the distance between them and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, a testing of unfamiliar waters, but it quickly deepened into something more urgent, more primal. Valka felt a warmth spreading through her that had nothing to do with the fur she wore against the winter chill. When they finally parted, both breathing heavily, Percival rested his forehead against hers. "That was unwise," Valka finished for him, though she made no move to step away. "I was going to say wonderful," Percival murmured. "But yes, probably unwise as well." Valka laughed softly. "My entire life has been spent doing what others considered unwise. Why stop now? What happens next?" Percival asked, his arms still around her waist. "I don't know," Valka admitted. "This is uncharted territory, even for me. My people will not easily accept a foreign man as their Jarl's chosen companion." "Then we must give them reason to accept it," Percival said thoughtfully. "Not just for our sake, but for Ravhome's future. Your vision of trade alongside raid, of alliances beyond warfare, it needs bridges between cultures. What stronger bridge than this?" Valka considered his words. "You speak as a strategist now, not a lover. Can I not be both?" Percival smiled. "You are both Jarl and woman, leader and lover. We all contain multitudes, Valka." She kissed him again, briefly this time. "We must be careful. Gunnar and others like him will see this as weakness, as evidence that I am unfit to lead. Then we prove them wrong," Percival said simply. "Day by day, decision by decision. You earned your place as Jarl through strength, wisdom, and vision. Those qualities have not changed because your heart has opened." They returned to the feast separately, but something had shifted irreversibly between them. Over the long winter months that followed, their relationship deepened in private while they maintained a careful public distance. Percival proved his worth to the settlement in countless ways, teaching some to read and write, helping plan trade expeditions for the spring, even training with the warriors to improve his fighting skills. He made no attempt to claim authority or special privilege as the Jarl's favorite, instead earning respect through his actions and knowledge. Valka, for her part, continued to lead with the same strength and wisdom that had won her the Jarldom. But those closest to her noticed a new serenity in her demeanor, a balance that made her even more effective as a leader. By the time the ice broke and the first ships prepared to sail in early spring, whispers about the Jarl and her Saxon advisor had spread throughout Ravhome. Some disapproved, particularly the old guard like Gunnar, but many had come to respect Percival enough that they reserved judgment. The first expedition of the new season was not a raid but a trading journey to the lands of the Rus to the east. Valka led it herself, with Percival among her crew. The voyage was long but successful, establishing new connections that would bring prosperity to Ravhome for years to come. It was on their return journey, as they sheltered in a small cove during a storm, that Percival finally spoke the words that had been building between them. "Marry me," he said simply as they sat alone by a small fire, the rain drumming on the sailcloth shelter above them. Valka looked at him in surprise. "You know what you ask. A Jarl's marriage is not just a personal matter, it is an alliance, a political decision." "I know," Percival nodded. "And I believe this alliance has merit beyond our feelings for each other. Think of the connections I can help forge, the knowledge I bring. Our children would bridge two worlds, understand both cultures in ways that could secure Ravholm's future. Our children, Valka repeated softly, the concept both terrifying and enticing. She had never thought much about motherhood, focused as she had been on proving herself as a warrior and leader. If the gods bless us with them, Percival said. But even if not, our union would stand as a symbol of what is possible when old hatreds are set aside. Valka was silent for a long moment, considering all the implications. Finally, she reached out and took his hand. When we return to Ravholm, she said, I will call a thing. The people must have a voice in this decision, as it affects them all. If they approve, then yes, Percival Inglet, I will marry you, not just as a woman who loves a man, but as a Jarl who sees the wisdom in such an alliance. Percival kissed her hand. I can ask for nothing fairer. The thing gathered 3 days after their return to Ravholm. The entire settlement crowded into the great hall to hear what their Jarl proposed. Valka stood before them, Percival at her side, both dressed in their finest clothes. People of Ravholm, Valka began, her voice clear and strong. For nearly a year, I have led you as Jarl. We have faced challenges, yes, but we have also prospered. Our storehouses are full, our defenses strong, our connections with other settlements growing. Today, I bring before you a matter that concerns both my personal happiness and the future of our people. She took a deep breath. I wish to take Percival Inglet as my husband. He has proven his loyalty to Ravholm, his wisdom in council, and his courage in battle. Our marriage would strengthen the new path we forge, one that includes raid when necessary but also trade and alliance where beneficial. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Gunnar Ironhand stepped forward, his expression grave. Jarl Valka, your leadership has indeed brought prosperity to Ravholm. None can deny this. But marriage to a Saxon, a man who until recently was a thrall, this is unprecedented. As was a woman becoming Jarl, Valka pointed out. Yet here we stand, stronger for that change. The children of such a union would be half Saxon, Eric called out. Would they truly be of Ravholm? They would be of Ravholm and of Angleland, Percival responded. Able to walk in both worlds, to forge connections others cannot. Is that not an advantage in changing times? Torsten the Elder raised his hand for silence. I have lived many winters, he said slowly. I have seen raids and peace, feast years and famine. What I have learned is that those who cannot adapt, die. The world beyond our shores changes whether we will it or not. Perhaps this union is the adaptation we need. Petra the Wise stepped into the center of the gathering, her milky eyes seeming to see beyond the physical realm. When Valka Haraldsdottir became Jarl, I had a vision of Ravholm prospering under her rule. I see now that this union is part of that vision. The Ravens of Odin approve. More discussion followed, some heated, some thoughtful. Valka and Percival stood side by side, neither interrupting nor defending themselves further. They had made their case, now it was for the thing to decide. Finally, Torsten called for a vote. One by one, the heads of households and respected warriors indicated their position. When the count was complete, the union had been approved, not unanimously, but by a clear majority. Gunnar approached them after the vote, his expression unreadable. I voted against, he said bluntly. But I will honor the thing's decision, as I honored it when you became Jarl. Prove my concerns unfounded, Valka Haraldsdottir, and I will be the first to admit I was wrong. Thank you for your honesty, Gunnar, Valka replied. Your counsel remains valuable to Ravholm, and I will continue to seek it. The wedding took place at the next full moon, combining Norse traditions with elements Percival introduced from his Saxon heritage. Valka wore a crown of spring flowers over her flowing hair, her gown the finest blue wool embroidered with silver threads. Percival stood tall and proud in Norse clothing but with a Saxon cloak pin that had belonged to his father. As they exchanged vows before the assembled people of Ravholm, binding their lives together under the watchful eyes of both the Norse gods and Percival's Christian one, Valka felt a sense of rightness she had never expected to find. This was not the life she had imagined when she returned to claim her father's jarldom, but it was perhaps the life she was meant to have, one that honored the old ways while embracing the new. "You have transformed Ravhome," Percival whispered to her during the feast that followed their ceremony. "A settlement that once lived only by the sword now forges a different path." "We have transformed it together," Valka corrected him. "And we will continue to do so, one day at a time." As they looked out over their people, Norse warriors and Saxon companions now mingling, sharing stories and mead, finding common ground despite centuries of conflict, they saw the future taking shape before them. It would not be an easy path, this bridging of worlds. There would be resistance, setbacks, perhaps even threats from those who feared change. But together, the scholar and the shield maiden, they would face whatever challenges came. For they had already done what many thought impossible, a Saxon and a Norse, finding love across the battle lines, the woman becoming Jarl and transforming an ancient settlement's destiny. And in that transformation lay hope not just for Ravhome, but for a world where understanding might someday replace hatred, where bridges could be built across even the widest divides.